Hi guys, MrRoflWaffles here. A couple of weeks ago, well, over a month ago now I think, Treyarch released the timeline, and that was very exciting. And then Chronicles came out, and that was very exciting. We began to get a new perspective on Black Ops 3 Zombies as a story and Call of Duty Zombies as a whole. And today, they've given us something new that pretty much puts a really weird spanner in those works. This is something that I don't really know how to describe because it's that goddamn weird, okay? And so in this video, I'm going to be jumping into it. It's a new loading screen from Zombies comic issue number 5. This is coming via my boy John, who's just uploaded a video on this, which is where I've got this screenshot from because I don't have the comic early right now. But, man, there is an awful lot to dive into here. So this video is going to be basically 10-15 minutes of me sitting down and talking about why this does not make any goddamn sense, and why Treyarch are clearly plotting something, but what exactly is still a mystery, okay? Let's do this. On your screen, right now, you have this new loading screen, and straight away, those of you that are particularly attentive will notice that this is actually a remade version of the Die Rise loading screen. This is not a Revelations loading screen. Don't get that confused, that's incorrect. This is a Die Rise loading screen that's been repurposed into the Black Ops 3 format, similar to how, for example, they did the Ascension one, and they repurposed it into Black Ops 3. They did Kino, repurposed it into the sort of Chronicles vibe, I suppose, as well. And so you've got those sorts of things coming through. In fact, that was the Black Ops 3 vibe because you had the giant cutscene in there too. So they've been repurposing things and giving us the new lens of Black Ops 3 to look through and essentially basically get a higher resolution version of some of the stuff from the past. And so this has all of the building blocks of the Die Rise loading screen. It's got the cutout on the right side of the screen that looks suspiciously like my boy Arthur. It's got the tear in the top left with Nuketown behind. It's got the transit postcard on the left side, but it's upside down, so that's why it doesn't really look like anything in particular, but that's the transit loading screen, or at least part of it, upside down, which was there in Die Rise as well. And generally just the composition of the image as well, the panels themselves is the same too. World map in the bottom right, world in the bottom left, and then some kind of wide shot in the top right, and the characters teleporting in the top left. Now, the reason why this is so interesting in its composition is twofold. One of the reasons that is that the original Die Rise loading screen is kind of backwards, because what happens in the actual Die Rise intro is that you see the Earth blown up, first of all, then you see the world map shot where the beam of light goes from one area to another, and that's the characters like teleporting in from their previous location at transit, presumably. Then we see the wide shot of Stuhlinger looking out across the roofs, and then it finishes up, that cutscene that is, with the characters dying and then accepting their fate, beginning anew, and they teleport back onto the roof in the spawn to start things over. Start over! I just had that Samantha quote coming in my head as I said that. So, the Die Rise loading screen then just looked like this, so the order was jumbled, you didn't have the Earth first, the world map second, etc., and this is showing the same pattern. So, could you say that what Treyarch are doing here is they are trying to convey the fact that the true order of these 4 particular panels are the perfect world in the bottom left being first? That is the first thing that we would see if this were a cutscene. Then the second thing would be the world map, which looks like the characters going from Stalingrad over to Sheffield, where Revelations, or rather the house in Revelations, is supposed to be plucked from. Then we see the wide shot of the characters going towards the house, and then we see them teleporting into the house. And now you're beginning, hopefully, to get an idea of why this makes so little sense. Because they've taken the Die Rise format and repurposed it for the Black Ops 3 stuff that's been going on, but it just doesn't make any sense. Why would the characters teleport in, outside the house, walk into the house, and then teleport to outside the house again? It's broken, it doesn't make any sense. It's like an anti-clockwise circle kind of thing, like you got in Die Rise, that just doesn't add up. There are a bunch of other problems with it as well. The fact that Arthur's cutout is still there, if you think that that is Arthur's cutout or not, is definitely up for debate, but it certainly looks like him, and the fact that they've kept the exact cutout still, and it really does look like the profile of a guy with his ear kind of there, and then his shoulder. I don't know, it's something to debate for sure, but then also, Just the fact that you've, in the top left, got the characters teleporting in this way, and one of the characters in that little group is Old RICHTOFEN. RICHTOFEN 1.0. Ultimis RICHTOFEN. It doesn't make any sense. It does not make any sense. Especially in the context of going from Nuketown and then transit, so that's 2035 kind of time, and then to this with Old RICHTOFEN, but the Primis crew? It's really bizarre. The only way that I can justify in my head that ever being a group of people that would come together like this is if this was in the 2-year gap between Origins, or rather between just after Origins, because in the timeline it states that that crew, basically the Primis crew that is, form a plan to stop Ultimis RICHTOFEN from basically doing all the stuff that triggers all of those future events. They form that plan, RICHTOFEN buzzes off for 2 years and does a bunch of stuff with the Alcatraz, with Blood, etc., while the other characters are basically in limbo. And so in that time, I suppose you could argue that they could somehow meet up with an Old RICHTOFEN and for some reason go to the house, but it just doesn't really make sense, especially if in the world map they're going from Stalingrad rather than going from Breslau. It just is broken on so many levels. You then, in the top right panel, have the house there with the characters walking towards it, which is not something that we see them do because they teleport into the house in the basement. They don't teleport outside and walk in, but one thing that's interesting is that in Origins, when you finish that cutscene, Samantha teleports Primis away to their next location where they meet up and then break up again for 2 years, but Maxis does go through the portal, does go into Agartha. Monty then fetches Maxis from Agartha, essentially, and brings him into the house. He steps in there, and so you could say that there could be a similar kind of thing going on here, where maybe, unbeknownst to Primis RICHTOFEN, the other characters go somewhere else first, but surely they would have talked about that at some point, so those characters all being there together and teleporting outside is just broken, really. It doesn't really make sense. They walk into the house, and then you've got that teleporting panel from Stalingrad, which would suggest that after GK, essentially, when the souls go up, the characters become soulless, and then they enter the house, but they go into the goddamn basement. So, and it's not Old RICHTOFEN, it's young Primis RICHTOFEN. So there's a bunch of issues with this. A bunch. And I am kind of at a loss as to what to think. It's really cool that you've got, for example, the perfect world there being detailed. That world is essentially, arguably, Agartha in a weird way, but it just doesn't really gel with my interpretation of Agartha, so I guess that's another thing that you could probably debate in the comments down below. But we see essentially that this is a non-disrupted world. It's not fractured and broken as it was in Die Rise, because those nukes haven't hit it. It hasn't been exploded by the events that happened on the moon, because this is prior to that, because in the next page we see Shino Numa and then the Giant, because on the next page is the remade Kino loading screen, which has RICHTOFEN shooting himself. So this is prior to that, which is why I'm suggesting that this might be something to do with the 2-year gap, because it's only after the 2-year gap that RICHTOFEN shoots himself and prevents the Earth from being blown up later down the line in Moon. So if this is prior to the 2-year gap, there's a question as to why 3 of Primis are meeting up with Ultimis RICHTOFEN in the house of all places, and they then forget that they have ever been to the house throughout Black Ops 3. Ultimis RICHTOFEN forgets who they are because they don't know each other when they finish that 2-year gap. In The Giant, he says, "Do you know who I am?" So he clearly isn't acquainted with them. So is it a different RICHTOFEN? Is this like a bonus extra mystery RICHTOFEN? Some kind of RICHTOFEN from a different timeline? Could this, in a really weird way, be Ultimis RICHTOFEN in the future, after he's been killed in that one branch of the timeline, but in the other branch of the timeline he obviously goes on to do the moon stuff. Could he have been plucked at some point during that chain of events, brought back here temporarily, informed that he needed to end up dying at the Giant, and that's why in the Giant, and I've said this since the very beginning, he looks like he is ready to die there, like he takes his hat off and, in my opinion, is essentially accepting his fate in that moment, in that cutscene, and then gets killed by himself. It's almost like he knows it's going to happen. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in here, and one thing I haven't even mentioned right now is, in the background of that top right panel, in the Revelations intro, we see an entire village, an entire town or whatever, in the background. We see Sheffield. We do not see that here. It's pretty barren. It's almost as like the Shadow Man has already come and wrenched this area because it just doesn't look like there's much continuation beyond the back of the house. And you could argue that's just fog rolling in or whatever. That's fine. Arguable for sure. But there's a definite kind of blue presence back there that is something to talk about. And another thing that I do really want to point out is the fact that there are crows above the house. And that's no coincidence. Those goddamn crows, man. They're everywhere. So, there's a huge amount of stuff in here that's unbelievably interesting, and I'm definitely going to be doing more videos on this. I think I might hit up a friend of mine, maybe a couple of friends of mine actually. We could do like a sort of storyline discussion about this that I think would be really, really enjoyable to watch, and it'll be a bit longer form as well, so I'm sure you guys would like that, but it's bizarre. 3 premise characters with older RICHTOFEN going towards the house. Like, the thing is as well is, like, Die Rise is a loading screen. You can't even read the right way round. You have to read it anti-clockwise if you follow the intro itself. If you don't follow the intro, then it's a completely different tale of events, essentially, and so it just ends up being really strange, like the world map being lost in that way. And it's not like we're going backwards, because you have the Giant stuff happening beforehand if you say that it's going backwards, and that means that Nuketown would be after. Which is just weird. That doesn't work, right? Nuketown, or does it? I don't even know at this point. It's so convoluted. And like I said, I'm going to have to talk to more people about this and do some more content on it. Let me know what you think about the fact that the Transit loading screen thing is in there. Transit remake confirmed. Let me know what you think about the fact that the Nuketown loading screen is in there. And that's another thing I didn't even mention yet in this goddamn video, is that it's the old Nuketown loading screen. It's not the refreshed version that is further zoomed out and slightly more detailed and coloured slightly differently. It's not that version. It's the old version. What? Why? It's just so bizarre. And then they're teleporting in, and the Earth is fine, sure, but then they're walking towards the house, and then they teleport in from... Like, is it some weird way of saying that that crew teleport in outside, and they go towards the house, and then the other characters teleport in from Stalingrad? Could it be that the final panel is trying to indicate that that is the transition of the souls, whereas the crew actually just teleport outside, and that's what we see in the first panel? That's plausible, I suppose. I suppose that is plausible, saying that the Primus crew, and obviously there's the issue of the fact that it's not Primus RICHTOFEN, but for now we'll avoid that. Maybe that's a weird soul thing going on there, but we could just argue for the sake of it right now that the Primus crew teleport in from Stalingrad in the first frame, and it's the perfect world which is being shown there, and they walk towards the house, and as they do so, the souls come in one by one in the basement. And then Monty does his little woohoo and turns them into the children, and then they're in the house with the older characters, which we see in the Revelations Director's Cut. Boy, oh boy, this is quite a mess, isn't it? It's a good mess. I don't know why it's Ultimis RICHTOFEN. I don't know why they look like they're all in T-pose. Like, they almost look like dolls, to be honest. Like, when I first saw this, I was like, is this in the snow globe or what? Like, something's fishy going on here. But it's bizarre. I mean, the final thing I want to mention is the fact that in the bottom left, that panel with the Earth, in the bottom right of that panel, there's like a kind of silhouette of something, like a meteor or something like that. I figured that would just be worth pointing out because it's interesting. So, guys, let me know what you think about this. Bizarre one for sure. Exciting though, and something I'm looking forward to discussing more because there's an awful lot of digging to be done here. So I've been MrRoflWaffles. Please leave a like on the video if you've enjoyed. I've also just hit 1 million subs, and I want to just say thank you real quick. I'll do a special at some point, but I don't know what it's going to be just yet. If you have any suggestions, let me know in the comments down below. But for now, I've been MrRoflWaffles, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.